everyone, it's Maddie.
And B, and we are unconventionally starting off at the beginning of this reading vlog by being in our car.
We are driving to Book Barn because we have roughly 50 books to unhaul and we didn't want to endow our local charity shops with loads of things that they find really hard to push.
A lot of the things we're taking to Book Barn are our university texts, and funnily enough we bought a lot of them at Book Barn too, so it's just, they'll never get them off their shelves.
The YA section in our local supermarket is pretty lacklustre. We're also picking up lunch.
The only new book they have in here is All of This Is True, but I don't know if it sounds like something I would necessarily enjoy.
They just always have loads and loads of these Disney books, which I'm pretty sure have been here for about 6 months.
Yeah, and it looks like they have, are these yet again
New editions.
But this is for Chamber of Secrets instead of those of Philosopher's Stone ones.
They'll always find new ways to make money off that series.
Like every year they'll bring out a new set, 'cause
Yeah.
it's been about a year since those ones came out.
Again, a very stereotypical selection for here, but we did manage to find 2 books.
I'm really excited for this one because we have now all the books in the trilogy and it means we can binge read them back to back. They do have one fairly recent release, but we're not going to get it. We do have it on Kindle though.
They have one of our favourite middle grade series, Seller, etc. 2 of, and they always have Louise Renison. And then lots of other little tiny paperbacks where it's like, if it's that small, it's probably not worth it.
Roughly 50 books, and at least we're coming away with one. This is one of the Jacqueline Wilson books that we haven't owned. I think only I've read it and you haven't.
Yeah,
this is Queenie, and it's all about a girl who has a long hospital stay and tells stories to all of her fellow patients.
Very recently, Maddie and I rearranged our shelves, de-assembled the rainbow to put them in genre order, so I'll give you a quick shelf. Up on the top we still have all of our middle grades in rainbow order, because why not? Up top are our thrillers and murder mysteries, and that sort of spills on to this shelf too, up until Frontlines, and from there it turns into historical and historical fantasy. And this shelf is entirely fantasy, and this shelf is fantasy, and then from Divergent you've got a little bit of dystopian, and then from Zenith you have our 3 sci-fi books. And then down here we have some magical realism and aliens, and then it's just our larger books that don't fit on any other shelf down there. The truth about our large absence from BookTube has been that we just haven't been reading. This year it's been like you can read 1 book a week and that's it, and that just makes choosing a lot harder, which is why practically the only reading we've done recently is for Read All Days, where we can read 4 books in one go. Getting rid of the rainbow shelves was a really quick decision. We just decided to do it one morning, and then suddenly all of our books were off the shelves and organised by genre. Because things get lost in the rainbow shelves, we couldn't say, oh, I'm in the mood for a contemporary, and then just find one. And now, because we've decided to do reading vlogs and these videos will become accountability for our reading, hopefully it'll get us more into the mood. Right now I'm just going to try and pick some books that I'm interested in reading. I have one book sticking out over there. It's A Sky Painted Gold by Laura Wood, and this was a recent acquisition. We were sent a copy by Scholastic, and it's historical, set in 1929, and it's over the summer, and I think there's some romance and secrets. So I'm really excited to read this one because I've heard great hype about it on Twitter. Then one that I've been wanting to read for ages is State of Sorrow by Melinda Salisbury. Can I wiggle this out with one hand? I bought this one at the beginning of the year sometime, pretty much as soon as it came out because it was in Tesco. I've read the chapter sampler of this, so I already know kind of the tone and the vibe, so I think I could be in the mood for this one. And then I feel it's only right if I go for some contemporary, as that is the majority of what we have on here. And I think it would have to be The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord, if it's not a reread, because I've been doing a lot of those recently. This was part of Zoella's book club, as you can see by the sticker, and I think it came out in the UK last year because Open Road Summer, which is, I think, her first book, but it's her 3rd book published in the UK, has recently come out. I think, if any, I'm most feeling State of Sorrow because I haven't read a fantasy in a super long time.
So the one book I'm absolutely desperate to read before YALC is Flawed by 7 UK YA authors, because I think having this signed by each and every one of them there is going to be amazing, and kind of like getting Disney princesses to sign an autograph book. Each author was responsible for one character, but they haven't disclosed who, so it's up to the readers to guess. On the blurb they've just put 1-sentence descriptions of the characters, so based on those I've made my initial predictions, I've made a note of them, and I'll just tell you now. I think that Tanya Tanya Byrne is responsible for Sasha, Holly Bourne is responsible for Hugo, Velvet is Eleanor Woods, Dawson is Non Pratt's, Caitlin is Sarah Barnard's, Jo is Lisa Williamson's, and then the mystery character is Melinda Salisbury's. Let's see if I'm right, shall we?
Last night I read around 200 pages of The State of Sorrow by Melinda Salisbury, and it's very slow-paced and reminding me quite a bit of her previous trilogy in terms of atmosphere, which I suppose isn't surprising. It's set in a completely new fantasy world, and the most exciting bit so far has probably been the prologue, so I have to admit that the trial chapter I did last year set me up with false hope. I've read another 50 pages so far today, and it's still plodding along. Maybe the foreshadowing is a little bit heavy-handed because I have guessed so many of the twists that have already happened.
It's day 3 and I just finished State of Sorrow. I did finally get some of the surprises that I was hoping for, and I think what this book does so well is misdirection. However, I don't think the end takes you too far away from the beginning. Like, there's conflict in the middle, but I think the next book in the series is really going to be where it kicks off. I liked the characters, and I think their full potential will only be met in sequels, as with character development. So I recently finished Flawed, and it's taken me a really long time to gather my thoughts on this one, because I'm thinking of it more as like a piece of UK YA history, as a collaboration between 7 authors. I've never seen something like this before that isn't an anthology, and it's actually like a cohesive story that continues on from one another. So as I previously mentioned, the whole part of the marketing scheme for this book is that you don't know which author is responsible for which character, and that's a good and a bad thing, because I'd like to hope that each author's voice is distinct enough for you to be able to recognise them in the characters, regardless of whether they're similar to a character they've created before or not. And I thought I'd have a lot of fun picking out which character belonged to which author and changing my mind as I went along, but in the end, I just couldn't really put my finger on it. I'm fascinated to see if they will eventually reveal which author wrote which character. My favourite character by the end was probably a draw between Caitlin and Velvet. I felt like Velvet was going through the roughest time throughout the 6 years that this book spans. Even though her chapters were quite short, I feel like she really developed throughout the book and was a different person from who she began as. And the same goes for Caitlin. She was the character that was slowly losing her sight and having to deal with telling people that that was her reality. You see her getting a cane and then a guide dog. It's really lovely. I've read about visually impaired characters before, and I thought that this was just as sensitive as an own voices representation. I liked how feisty Caitlin was, and her relationship with Dawson throughout the book was pretty turbulent but still very interesting to read. I think coming in second as my favourite was Sasha, but that's probably because I felt like she had the most time given to her in this book, as there are 6 characters and then the 7th perspective is a third person, and that third person was definitely leaning more towards Sasha in the final 2 years. She was definitely the glue that was keeping this group together, and I really appreciated that. She also had a very difficult relationship with her dad, of wanting to please him but feeling like he controlled her too much, and I thought that that could have been its own book because we didn't get to see a lot of that as she was with her friends rather than with her family. So when I find out if we get to find out who writes Sasha, I'm definitely going to track down those authors' books because I'd love to see what they do with a bigger scope. The only character I didn't really like was Hugo because he came off as a caricature of wealthy and entitled people. His portrayal just felt a little bit too generic for me, and he was the one that lost touch with the group, and when he wasn't there, I was like, great, we can just cut him out of the story because he's not really adding anything, and because he connected least to them, I couldn't really invest in his eventual development throughout the later years. Overall, I thought that the story was successful, but with this many characters, I think it's impossible to like them all equally, so I was paying a lot more attention to the characters I was drawn to in the moment. If you're interested in the concept, then I definitely give this one a read, and I'm going to give it a 3-star rating.
After picking up The State of Sorrow, I decided to go for a Sky Painted Gold. I'm 110 pages through, and everything I thought about it was wrong. It's not about twins, it's about a slightly older brother and sister who live across a lake from Lou's family, and she breaks into their house when she was a teenager, and now her sister has just got married, and suddenly she's been found out by the return of the brother and sister, and then they invite her to a special party, and she sort of becomes their new toy.
Maddie, what are you reading?
I'm reading Super Awkward by Beth Jarrett, and this is the first book in a trilogy, and we have all 3 books, so once I finish this one, I'm just gonna binge the series because I'm really enjoying it so far. We had the pleasure of meeting Beth at Cringe Fest last year, and she was absolutely lovely. The scenes she described from her book that year I can still remember, so I was anticipating them here.
Okay.
And they happened within like the first 100 pages, but since then, like, the awkwardness...
Surprise after surprise.
Yeah, exactly, and like the awkwardness and the cringiness of the situations have got stronger, and the way Bella reacts to them is just so hilarious. So I'm finding it really good because normally that kind of like embarrassment humour doesn't get me, but this
time. I'm really
is.
invested in it, and I think that's all down to Bella's voice, because you just get sucked into her character and feel loads of sympathy for her, even if the worst possible things are happening.
How long is your book, did you say?
My book's 400 pages and I'm 315 pages through.
Okay, so you're on the descend
Yeah.
into the end.
Yeah, and there's a prom at the finale, so...
In between reading A Sky Painted Gold, I decided to pick up The Moonlight Dreamers by Siobhan Curran, and this was because I was so in the mood for a friendship story. And this is a story of 4 friends, Amber, Sky, Rose, and Marley. I have to say that it did come across a little bit younger than I was expecting, even though the characters are all around 16. Something about the fact that they had created this club, which felt a little bit like a cult at some times, and the way that the story was structured, it just felt like a few of the middle grade stories that are on our shelves up there, so it made me think that I probably would have liked this a lot more a few years ago. I just felt like Emma was a super rude character. I couldn't believe her behaviour, so I kind of wrote her off, even though she's meant to be sort of the central bond for all 4 of the girls. My favourite storyline was probably Rose, and I hear she comes out as queer in the next book, but I don't think I'm as invested in all 4 of them to continue on to that. But I still got through it. It was a really quick read, and I enjoyed glimmering parts of it, but I think overall it would be more suited to a slightly younger audience. Over the last couple of days, I've been really attached to Super Awkward by Beth Jarrett because I haven't been able to put it down. I found it an absolutely hilarious read, and it's joining the ranks among Geek Girl as some of my favourite hilarious YA. I was talking to Bea about it as she was sat next to me whilst I was reading some of the most cringy moments, and I just wanted to put my fist in my mouth and crawl out of my body because it was just too intense. But it didn't fall backwards on being over the top or gross or anything like that. It was just actually funny, and I haven't experienced that in a book before. I feel like a couple of years ago, awkward was just used to describe every single social situation that was a little bit uncomfortable, and this takes it to the next extreme. But this book goes a step further, and the situations actually deserve the title awkward. I really enjoyed Bella's voice. I thought it was so consistent and really hit the mark for me. I finished A Sky Painted Gold, and I really enjoyed it at the end. I was pleasantly surprised by how the romance didn't turn into this huge conflict. This story drew me in with its incredible atmosphere. You really find yourself in the same place as Lou, really enraptured by everything going on around you. My only wish is that the sister dynamic had been played up a little bit more and we could have explored that relationship, but I really liked getting to see the socialite scene in this detail. There was a surprise FF romance thread too, which is always a big tick in my book, so at the end of the day I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. And those are all the books we have to talk about. Thank you everyone so much for watching this video, and if you've read it, let us know your thoughts on the books we've read in the comments. Thank you everyone so much for watching. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at MaddieandB, and we make bookish videos every week, so subscribe if you haven't already.